Hi everyone, today I'm going to be talking about creating pollinator-friendly gardens, which as a beekeeper can be a really beneficial practice for keeping your bee colonies happy and healthy. So the objectives of this lecture are to understand the relationship between flowering plants and pollinators, learn how to arrange the flowers in a way that is both convenient and beneficial for honeybees, and be able to identify key plants for each season that are beneficial to honeybees. So in a pollinator garden, it's really important to have plant species that will bloom in the spring, summer, and autumn. And those all provide different purposes. So spring bloomers will really help build up the colony and prepare for all the foraging that they have to get done. Summer bloom provides most of the honey flow that will go into uh, the honey production. And then species that bloom in the later season in autumn really help colonies prepare for the winter. So it's important to make sure that there's plants blooming throughout all times of the foraging season. So first and foremost, it's important to understand that honeybees have co-evolved with their locally native plants, so they have a really symbiotic relationship where one cannot survive without the other. Flowering plants rely on pollinators for reproduction, and they provide nectar to incentivize that reproduction, which acts as the pollinator's food source. So again, one really can't survive without the other. If they rely on this type of pollination services. So a general checklist for pollinator-friendly gardens is you want to include a lot of color. You want to have clusters of single species plants in one area. You want to make sure that there's a big floral abundancy and diversity. And then also you want to include as many native plants as possible. So we'll go into a little more detail on each of these points. First is the masses of color. Honeybees are attracted to bright colors and colorful patterns, so you want to be sure to include as many colors and patterns as possible in your garden, particularly blue, yellow, purple, violet, and white flowers, or along that spectrum. And then also, some flowers have what's known as landing strips for the honeybees, which makes it really easy for the bee to find the nectar and for the flower to get pollinated. So those are great to include as well. Honeybees have what's known as flower constancy, which means that they will work all of the flowers of one species before moving on to the next. So they don't bounce around, and this makes them very efficient pollinators. So if you have one species of flowers, you don't want some daisies over there and some over here. You want to keep all of the same species in one cluster so that the bees can do their job particularly efficiently. Abundance and diversity. This one is pretty obvious. The more the better. Flowers provide nectar and pollen for honeybees and other pollinators, so the more flowers that are available, the more food resources are available, and the stronger and healthier colonies can become. So and a wider diversity, will really help build up that nectar flow and help beekeepers have a really strong honey harvest at the end of the season. And then native plants. It's important to prioritize native plants when you can. Often they will provide more nutrient-rich nectar and pollen, so their nectar and pollen will likely have a higher protein content for the honeybees than introduced species. And if you are getting bees from a local supplier, then native plants are particularly important because, as we talked about earlier, honeybees and flowers have really coexisted, so it's best to provide them with native plants that they are familiar with and likely are already used to foraging. Also, native plants are typically better adapted to the local climate, which means that they often require less agricultural inputs such as water and fertilizers, and they are usually more resistant to unwanted weeds and pests, which is great because you want to try to not use pesticides or insecticides if possible in your garden, as a lot of these pesticides will have really harmful or even lethal effects for the bees. So here's a list provided by the Exo Society on native plants in the Great Lakes area and their bloom time. So you can see what blooms in the early, mid-late, and late season, and the common and scientific name of those plants. So this would be a really great list to choose some plants for it to go in your pollinator-friendly garden, including 2 or 3 from each bloom period would make for a really strong garden that the bees and other pollinators would be super happy to forage from. So resources like this are great to find, and just kind of pick and choose from these types of lists that are provided. So that was kind of a really fast overview of pollinator-friendly gardens, but I thought this was a really great graphic provided by the U.S. Forest Service. In order to plan your garden, you really have to think like a pollinator. Like we said, going native is really great. Be showy, that's with the colorful patterns and bright colors and all that. And then be bountiful. Again, there's really no such thing as too much food resources for the honeybees. So the more that you can provide them with right outside their colony, the better off that colony is going to be.